Hello everybody, it is Mike Levin on Saturday, June 25th, 2022. I'm doing some runs back and forth to public storage to dump off some stuff so that I don't have a big move. The idea is that when I get to my new place, new life, new chapter, I'm not clogged up by all the stuff of the past. And I get to design what's around me. Organized environment, organized mind. And I'm tempted to just throw out so much stuff, just toss it, but it takes time. It takes time to evaluate. Evaluating as you go and putting things into their proper rows and columns. That's a lot like in the programming world, relational database work, row and column work. Stuff like in Microsoft Excel or SQL Server, which slows you down because you've got to understand your data. You need to stop and study it. You need to do the analysis, or at least a little bit of the data analysis while you go, so you can deconstruct it into rows and columns and drop everything into their appropriate bins. That's one way stuff is done. And most often, that's how things end up, several steps down the process. However, more and more often these days, because such thought work about your data does not need to be front-loaded into the data capture step, there's key value, NoSQL. NoSQL is the popular term, but the concept's been around forever, and it's profoundly well optimized from a computer science standpoint. That's an important thing to know here. That you can have key value pairs where the keys are searchable, not necessarily the values. The values are just things that you pull up as a result of a search, but the keys are profoundly high performance searchable with thousands of key value pairs, millions of key value pairs, verging on trillions. We might not be at that point yet, but that's certainly, not far away. And I've talked about it in prior videos, how this is accomplished. It's hierarchical nesting of search indexes. You can always cut things in half and cut things in half again and guarantee a certain number of steps to find something. So it's not an open-ended problem. There is a fixed, time space, a fixed space within which that search will be guaranteed to occur. So key value pairs are a lot more useful than one might think, and so that you can just capture and dump and capture and dump and capture and dump and then worry about your data transforms later. That's what I'm doing. I got that public storage facility so that I could do a fast key value pair dump out from the old house into public storage. Minimal amount of purging as I go. And, it's a little bit of a Rubik's Cube puzzle, or a little bit of one of those Tetris or Jenga, interlocking puzzle. It's not nearly as much of an issue as figuring out what I keep and what I get rid of. But there is a little bit of Tetris maneuvering to get everything into a 10 by 15 storage facility from a prior life. I think by the end of today, in a few hours, I'll have it down to beds and desks and pet-related stuff. Clothes and stuff in the cabinets, but that can be done, in a few trips in the 11th hour. The big heavy stuff that cuts down how much cabinetry. See, once you have plates and clothing, you can pack a Jeep like this. This is a Wrangler Unlimited, so it goes back quite a distance. It's the family version of the Jeep Wrangler that has a back seat. And you can pack a vehicle like this with a lot of dishes and clothing. So I'm not too worried about that last final phase. It's the big stuff that keeps those last final trips from packing the car tight, things that take up a lot of weird space, like chairs. So what can I talk about? I feel like I need to talk, and it's always interesting getting started with one of these videos because I can alternate between personal and work, and I see the overlaps and I see the integrations everywhere. My recent work has been pushing myself to a next level, right? I'm unlocking the next level. There's always a next level being unlocked. And in general, my next level that I unlocked was a complete comfortableness in Linux terminal, in non-graphics Linux. Opening up one of those, very command prompt looking things, but instead of the backslashes of old DOS prompts from the Windows world, it's the forward slashes of, I guess, both Macintoshes and everything under the Unix and Linux world. The Unix world going back over 50 years. All right, so we're talking, I've been repositioning myself onto technology that's been around for as long as I have. It's technically the same age as me. We're both 51 years old. It came out in 1970. And the Vim text editor that I use came from the VI text editor, which came out not long after Unix in 1976. So both the operating system and the main productivity piece of software I live in the operating system, the app, are both nearly as old as I am, right? The operating system is, and the text editing app is almost, even though I'm on Vim and not VI, but that ties together with other passions of mine. If you're not loving what you're doing, and if you're not seeing the undercurrents and the stories and the love-worthiness, you gotta step back and reevaluate. You gotta look at what you're doing and why. So the fact that Unix was cobbled together by Ken Thompson, a lot of credit is given to Ken Thompson, is still alive and ticking, still doing productive work on this planet. Ken Thompson, who started out at Bell Labs as a Californiaite who was repositioned into East Coast, the East Coast tech, before the Silicon Valley explosion. Everything happened in the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. University of Pennsylvania had one of the world's first known computers, one of the world's first talked about computers. The Brits had the first computers, or at least the first practically used during modern times computers. The Alan Turing machine that broke the Enigma code of the Germans. But when computers first started getting, commercial acceptance, that was from the ENIAC at the University of Pennsylvania. I previously attributed it to Princeton University, but it wasn't Princeton, it was University of Pennsylvania, where the first computer was invented, the vacuum tube type with, the classical relay type switches, as opposed to the rotating tumblers and such of the Alan Turing computer. They're spiritually quite different. Charles Babbage, in the UK, of course, a century prior, had done a similar switches type computer. He never finished it to the final model, the analytic engine, something along those lines. But all the basic premises are there, and they switched over from the mechanical stuff to the more digital-like stuff. It's digital. It's technically digital. I sometimes call it analog because of the vacuum tubes. But once you have non-moving parts, visibly non-moving parts, because on the molecular level, of course, there's still moving parts. You ever touch a flash disk after you've done a lot of storage, it heats up. Isn't that old school? You save a lot to an external USB drive and a keychain drive, and that keychain drive heats up. That's because there's resistance for persistence. Persistence requires resistance because it's not dynamic RAM like in the computer, the fast fast processing RAM that as fast as you remove power, it loses state. In flash RAM, when you remove power, it keeps its state. And in order to have acquired that state it's capable of keeping, it took more heat energy being put into it. So you never really get rid of moving parts. Even quantum computing has moving parts. But the move from the Alan Turing code-breaking computer to the University of Pennsylvania ENIAC went solid state. We call it solid state vacuum tubes. Vacuum tubes were eventually replaced by transistors, and transistors were shrunk down and put onto a same piece, and that's the integrated circuit. And that pretty much brings us to where we are today. There's a few technologies that are beyond the integrated circuit, multi-dimensional stuff, but for the most part, you know, we live in an integrated circuit world. Now, that trick of using switches for logic turns things binary, on and off, black and white. And that's apropos to talk about today because, you know, Pride Parade. I'll be in New York City tomorrow for the Pride Parade with my child. And that makes the point that the world isn't necessarily binary in black and white. The real world is not merely shades of gray, but it's a rainbow of colors. And what we do with digital electronics is a trick. It's a trick of thunking things down through a process of sampling. And that makes things much more deterministic than they would otherwise be. Analog keeps the option open for infinite variety based on initial conditions, because initial conditions has a lot more resolution than binary bits. Binary bits down to some digit, some number of decimal points, determines what your smallest unit of measure is. And by having that, there's determinism inserted into the system, a sort of determinism that naturally either is not there at all, we don't really know yet, or which tends to elude us. This creates a cognitive dissonance concerning artificial intelligences of today. Someone was fired from Google saying their chatbot had achieved sentience. And the counter arguments was that everything it's doing is statistical and, in fact, deterministic in nature. Well, isn't everything humans are doing statistical and deterministic in nature? We actually don't know that. That's one of the unanswered questions of the world. But you will find some interesting variations on experiments. You can do the Lorentz butterfly attractor plotting, which is that famous butterfly-looking figure eight of 3 dots that orbit around a center point, which simulates a pendulum, 3 pendulums swinging, and the interaction of the pendulums with each other under the influence of gravity to each other. So it's a really interesting simulation, which in a digital system is deterministic in nature because you can know original conditions. It's unpredictable. It's chaotic. So you can have determinism and chaos at the same time. Given these initial conditions, every time you play back this Lorentz attractor butterfly thing, it will go through the exact same steps, even though, you know, however many thousands or millions of iterations through, you cannot have predicted or predetermined. You have to run it to see the final state. But given the same initial conditions, it'll be in that final state however many millions of iterations later, because it's digital. The Lorentz butterfly attractor was not originally plotted on digital computers. It was plotted on analog computers, where initial conditions cannot ever precisely be known. Yeah. So the cognitive dissonance that tells us artificial intelligence can't be real because it is always predetermined in nature, even if chaotic properties emerge, which is granted. There can be unpredictability even while deterministic. That is still a source of disturbance on whether an artificial intelligence is real or not. To get rid of that final bit of determinism and the argument that it's just a clickware machine, you base it on analog computers. Base a simulated brain on an analog computer, and the sentience that arises may be real. Indisputably, as genuine of a sentient soul as a human being. Because the final arguments of a more clockwork universe than we are subject to go away. There are no measurable initial conditions. The initial conditions are the initial conditions of the real physical analog world, which cannot be known down to the E equals mc squared energy composition of the particles. Every particle, every proton has as many, photon-like particles inside of it as there are protons in the actual universe. There's as many atoms in an atom as there are atoms in our universe. The next level down is just as tiny compared to the protons and neutrons and quarks that we're familiar with now as our atoms to our physical world, right? Scale is a weird thing. Orders of magnitude. So there's just no way that we can actually know the initial state, even if we say down to the atom, down to the particle. Sorry, down to the next universe of particles down. You see, because initial conditions are quite a bit more deep of a rabbit hole than people who are used to thinking about things in thunked digital terms are used to. And so here we are at public storage, and I've got everything I need to keep this a continuous shoot without all the phone dropping I did on the last time I did this. I'm not under quite as well, I'm under every bit as much stress. I'm going to pick up my kid tonight to do the first sleepover at the new place tonight, and I have nothing. I have zero over there. And so after these runs back and forth, I'll be grabbing enough stuff in order to have an overnight, a camping style overnight. I have electricity, I have gas, I have everything hooked up over there, but I don't have internet, so we'll be working off of our 5G connections, which should be plenty. There's no reason 5G isn't enough for one sleepover. Boy, the world we live in, right? So, I'll remind you, this is my high-tech phone holding device, and I just switch that over to here. I construct a little X for a little bit extra holding security, and then I'll clip that onto something, and I'll probably cover my driver's my license plate, although that doesn't matter too much. And then keep going with this video and switch to the next topic. What will that next topic be? What am I even talking about? Am I going to APIs? I feel I want to go to APIs. I feel I want to go to next level stuff on professional work, because whenever the personal stuff becomes a little too, painful or personal, right? it's easy to just switch to the professional stuff, which is always interesting and always easy for me to talk about, and has overlapping subject matter. There is never not relationships between what's going on in the professional world and what's going on in the personal world. There's this thing about ducking Jeeps. Our Jeep has been ducked. This is the ducking of the last Jeep. I will allow my child to duck a new Jeep with this, and so the chain of Jeep ducking continues. Whoa, so much good and interesting stuff. Oh, here's my sweater. My sweater will be my license plate cover. Boop, boop, boop. And then we stick this onto the car here. Get a nice good grip. Get maybe a view of the car, end of the door. A little of this, a little of that. You know I'm serious when I'm putting the cat towers in storage. So let me just jump right to some of the professional stuff, because it's as interesting as anything I've ever dealt with. The next level, going from Linux terminals, is to go to Linux containers. I mean, I've used virtual machines, not so much the KVM. The KVM, the kernel virtual machine, which was the formalization of virtual machines under Linux, has been out for a number of years now and has been like a necessity because the technology became so popular. I think this is too far. I think I'm going to mostly be working inside of the facility here. So I think I should put it here and just come out to the car briefly and talk to this here as I go, because I need to make room. I need to just shuffle stuff around. This is the shuffle. Okay, so Linux terminal has won. It's taken over the world. In case you have not been informed, Star Nix, Unix and Linux platforms have won. Everybody knows it, even Microsoft. Microsoft's including of the Windows subsystem for Linux, and going so out of their way to make it easy to install under Windows 11 is your key indication that the final nails are being hammered into the coffin of proprietary operating system software. Nobody wants it anymore. Apple made that decision in 2007 and a move from OS 9 to OS X at the same time as they switched from PowerPC hardware to Intel hardware, and now they've switched from Intel hardware to ARM hardware, really making the point that the shell game is used everywhere. The shell game is where nothing really matters except the operating system. The operating system is the great interoperable layer. There might be some other translation things going on here and there so that the binaries are easily portable between hardware, or there might be a recompile of software that's necessary. But because, the operating system itself is so tied to the C programming language, and the C programming language is so designed for interoperability using the same virtual machine techniques that Java touted as its own invention so many years later, software can be easily recompiled between different NICS operating systems. The benefit carried over to proprietary operating systems like Windows, but not because they were designed that way, but because proprietary operating systems like Windows have, for many, many years, all been programmed with the C programming language. Thus, the advantage of portability trickles down to everything underneath. So proprietary systems of late have been the beneficiaries of the same Unix innovations that Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie brought to the world, carrying on the work of the guy who wrote BCPL. BCPL is what led to C. And then C led to Unix, and then Unix led to every other proprietary modern operating system like Windows. And so now that's the world we live in. So it only makes sense that that extra little bit of proprietary gets purged out, gets ultimately and finally purged out of the system. So instead of proprietary, it's just the Unix/Linux that it was all kind of born from anyway. Portable operating system. Why take a portable operating system and use its tools to create a proprietary operating system except to lock you in to that proprietary world? That is the reason, to lock you into the proprietary world. Otherwise, you would choose Unix or Linux. There's no reason not to. Now, the next thought being that now that that knowledge has sort of settled in now as common knowledge. By the way, I'm rethinking some of the layout because I don't think the canoe's going to end up in here after all. There's no way I'm going to do it. And I have an alternative place I can store the canoe. So I can put some shelving into that corner, which allows me to load everything from this table into that corner, and then open it up a little bit for the next round of shuffling. So I'll talk to you a little bit while I do that. There's no reason to not put this time to work. I'm creating an OR gate. One of my favorite jokes is that the character from Catch-22, the book, not one of the many movie interpretations, although it might get it across, his name is Orr. Orr, the character Orr, became expert at crashing his airplane. Nobody knew whether he was alive or dead. Or, O-R-R, it had an extra R in it. But just ponder that for a moment. In a book called Catch-22, which has come to be the expression for you lose either way, that things aren't really the choice that's put in front of you, the book, whose name has become synonymous with that concept, has a character who became so skilled at deliberately crashing a plane that one day he just disappeared. Is Orr alive or dead? Can it be reduced to binary? Subtlety and nuance count, my friends. Subtlety and nuance let you beat the system. Subtlety and nuance are a large part of what it means to be alive, to be a living creature, to be matter that matters. Matter that matters can break the physical laws of science, seemingly, can overcome the rules of entropy, second law of thermodynamics, that things move towards chaos, preservation of internal momentum, that you can't bootstrap yourself. This is life. Life is kind of a force of will, sentient life. All life, but in particular, life going up and up a pyramid to a higher order form, higher in, you know, abstract symbolic reasoning capability, and higher in your physical body where it's located. Your neocortex. Higher order thought. Now, there are those who are stringently, vehemently, intensely opposed to the concept of higher order and lower order insults them. They get angry over the use of such terms. And I smiled to myself going, I know exactly what parts of you are getting angry. We all have that three-ring circus inside our bodies. That three-ring circus has a lot of different acts. Those acts come from different evolutionary functions of our past. There's the worm act. Over here in this corner, in this circle, you will see the thing that must keep hydrated and, you know, not and out of the light and moving in order to absorb nutrients. Ooh, a backing. I think this is to a telescope. I've got a lot of organizing that I'd like to do, but I really must abide by the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 friggin' rule, gotta use it, it's a tool. Reducing clutter that we pack into our lives to hold us back. When goals elude and time flies past, and with each step you're still in last, and with each step you lose your aim, you'll find recursive tasks to blame. The 80-20 rule just asks you to start to plan your tasks. So when you're only 1/5 done, you could have stopped and still have won. Original poetry, ladies and gentlemen. My own creation. There is so much I'd like to say and do, but I cannot and will not share everything with you. Hey, I'll polish some rocks. All I'm trying to do now is to clear a way to do that deeper puzzle game. And the main thing I must do is violate the 80-20 rule in this sort of organization that I'm compelled to do little bits of here and there. Part of that is the knowledge to not tie up and sort of ruin a shelf by putting the one thing on top of it that keeps it from stacking higher. That's a stupid move. This is highly insulting. I just have to clear off the bottom shelf of it. And that I've got an idea for. That can allow for additional shelves maybe over there. I don't know. Don't try and get clever. You know, just collapse these down. I don't need this storage. 80-20 rule just asks you to start to plan your tasks. So when you're only 1/5 done, you could have stopped and still have won. These things, when going the other way, stacked for space efficiency and stop using up space. And that opens up so much space with very little effort. It can optionally be one shelf. But even so, maybe not. We just put that out of the way. Out of the way is key. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. That table is mostly emptied, and if I get rid of the stuff on this table and just throw it somewhere else, I have opened up a lot of interior space. So can that be done while abiding by the 80-20 rule? Do I have some boxes that have not been filled up that I can just throw stuff in willy-nilly? I do. I put some stuff from that box that's occupying space that could be better off on a shelf onto that shelf. And then I just do it by the handful. I can even use this Lego bag. This was one of my kids' Lego bags growing up. One of the various times I had gotten the Lego bags. I got some good stuff that I don't even want to pack away. I'm going to get a few things for the new place, some old familiars, a theremin. There should be some time killers, some things that are fun. A little bit of clay, and so I'm going to like mine for stuff that's a blast from the past that could be fun at the new place. I'll throw those in the car so that we can at least have some fun recapturing or rekindling maybe some old times. I mean, you don't want to live in the past. But you do want to learn from it. One of the things you want to do is take note. Taking note is one of the most important things in all of life. You take note of things so that when you take note of things again later, you can put 2 and 2 together. 2 and 2 don't always equal 4. You think they do, but it's not true. 2 and 2 sometimes equals 5. Case in point, another shelf level I can add to that shelf I just put over there. That is not adding 1 more shelf level, that's adding 2 more shelf levels. Or is it? That last one there is actually one of them, isn't it? I had those things on upside down. So many lessons about APIs and design. I was watching such an interesting video on YouTube about origami. Origami is revolutionizing a lot of manufacturing processes, and space exploration, solar cells, solar collectors, I guess. It doesn't count as many moving parts if it's folded from one piece. there's all kinds of algorithms now to optimize folding from finished patterns. You can say, I want to create this pattern, and what do I do now to have that pattern? So I don't want to throw all my servers. I had this little spot here of all these servers. I had this vision of having a little lab where I would work and stuff. Look at all these Raspberry Pis and Shiva plugs and stuff. So I guess I'm going to put those over here. I'll put them in a little basket that'll be easy enough to access. I'll put the boxing gloves that were in that over here. And I'll just start to thematically group stuff by themes without going overboard. Do not go overboard. Rapid. Oh, with a big open space, holy smokes, a big open space of an apartment, we'll do some bowling. I hope that doesn't disturb the neighbors downstairs. Oh boy, do I set myself up for a fall with that? I probably do, but it's a unique opportunity, and I'll do some carpeting underneath of it. I have a longer stretch of open space indoors than I've had in a really, really long time. We could maybe do some fort building if I could find enough of the plastic pieces that go on the end of this thing. That could be a lot of fun in an open space. So I'll do that. That'll be fun. You know, and I'll keep my eyes peeled now for those little rubber things that go on the end of these. So I'm clearly not just putting stuff in storage today. I'm doing shopping to bring joy and love to the first night at this new place. Here's a Fit PC that ran Gentoo or Gentoo Linux. That's one of the only times I ran Gentoo or Gentoo, one of the really old school compile it yourself Linuxes. And then this is the world famous and notorious WRT router, the Linksys, let's see the full name. Yeah, Wireless G Linksys. It's the WRT router that spawned the Open WRT project, whereby it was one of the first and most glorious examples of a vendor, in this case Linksys, violating Richard Matthew Stallman's RMS's GNU license, GNU General License, the GNU 2 General License. Which stated that if you use this free and open source code and you use it for commercial gain, you have to contribute back your modifications. And this became one of the most hackable and useful devices in all history. You could do such things as flip someone's screen upside down if they came through it and they wouldn't know what the heck was going on. All kinds of fun tricks, nefarious and fun. My kid did this linking in this rope, so I'll be keeping that intact. And I'll see that again at some point. Blast from the past stuff. Oh, talk about blast from the past. Well, I have reason. I thought this thing was retired for good. I thought I'd never have to have this out again. This is coming with me. I need that. It's nuts that I need it, but I certainly do. I'll pull this over my face at some point. Say it's time to be Batman. We're getting there, we're getting there. Anything that's already in a nice little shelf or a tray is easily transposed to a shelf where it can sit nicely as a tray. I'm making really great progress. It might not be going as fast as I like. Oh, here's the microscope, but it's not the bottom piece that I had hoped. But I'll keep my eyes peeled for it. This and all this stuff all goes into that box I'm using. All this, I guess, too. This is server stuff. Tricorder. Go board, mezuzah, woodpecker. The sticks that you do spinning plates on. Life is funny and strange. The closer you get to the end, the more the effect called diminishing returns sets in. Diminishing returns is less work back than the energy you're putting in, especially compared to the beginning, near the beginning of the work. By reserving that space for the canoe, such as I had, I'm getting a surprise bonus of open shelf space that I didn't think I was going to have. I can even start to group like things, which was a advantage I didn't think I was going to have. Oh, continuing the Alice theme, right? That'll go back with me. The teacup rides at the various Disneys, Disney World and Disneyland, have been part of our life growing up. Whether they remember it or not, I remember my times there. I know what was significant to me on my Disneyland and Disney World. Or for me growing up, it was just Disney World. Disneyland is a new thing in our lives because of VidCon 2018. Fateful conference. All right, all that, and now it's just time to start packing stuff in that I brought here. Let's start with some lawn chairs. Who knows, maybe I'll be living on lawn chairs in the new place. Not beyond possibility. They're certainly comfortable enough. Yucky water running out of those things. Whew. must fight diminishing returns, right? Diminishing returns makes you slow down more the more you go. So you identify the big sweeping improvements, the small touches that have the biggest payback, and you do them. Small touch, big payoff. Half this stuff I don't even know why I'm keeping it. Oh. Best laid plans of mice and men. I might need these pads for some moving stuff. Light touch, large payoff. This motorcycle, this electric razor motorcycle, it's along the lines of a bouncy pig that I'll show you in a moment, which I'm just not throwing out. Ugh. Whoa. Let's save the Chiron generator. This could be in a better place. I might take that to the new place. I love that. Yeah, here's Bouncy Pig. I promised them I wouldn't throw it out. I'm not throwing it out. That electric bike was such a big part of their growing up. It's not time to get rid of it yet. But now it's on the top shelf, which was otherwise quite unutilized. Spinning plate stick is actually going to go back in the car because I'm going to find some spinning plates and do a symbolic new beginning of one of my favorite symbols. Speaking of symbols, here's a nice little table that I might bring to the new place, but I'm going to keep it here first. I like it because it's broken. It's like Stitch's family. It's small and it's broken, but it's mine. One of the big realizations I had lately is that the bottom rungs of the Maslow self-actualization pyramid had an extra rung that I rarely ever thought of for myself. And that was, contains things like property. The security thing above food, clothing, and shelter is like this property and security level. And I'm like, wait, what? That is definitely an agenda. That does not sound like an actual need. We are not born with like the need for property. That's just complete BS. So whoever made that particular Maslow's self-actualization pyramid diagram, or whether it was Maslow himself, I call BS on it. BS, BS. Nobody owns property. It's an illusion. You hardly even own the matter of your own body. We're here passing through. And if you need a sense of security, your sense of security should arise from within. There's no power without control. Control oneself. Control yourself. Spontaneous and automatic psychoanalysis and psychosynthesis. That's coming with me. All right, it's time to probably fit a few more things in here. I can roll this glass thing towards the back. Trick is to just not make it too hard to navigate towards the back here. The little table can go on top of the IQ Air. That can go back here. Anything remaining going back in that corner can be stuck in over top of it. This being here will not really block access to much space. It still allows getting into that corner. All right, now we're getting somewhere. Now this table can be collapsed down, which opens things up for what I really brought in the car. We take our not Chiron generator, that's a completely different thing. Van der Graaf generator. This table might go with me to the new place, maybe even tonight. Of all the things you might kind of sort of need, table space is one of them. Temporary is the rule. Those things which can temporarily be loaded up into different places in different ways. Interlocking is often important. Everything is interrelated. Everything interconnects one way or another. Was I talking about Linux and LXD and LXC? I think I was. Yes, you were. So, in regards to LXD and LXC, we have a certain API issue, application program interface issue. What is that issue? Oh, look, just Raspberry Pi sitting around on the ground. That issue is that LXC is the command line interface. It's the CLI program, the main way to interact with LXD. So the system service you have running, the daemon running on your system, is LXD. The way you interact with the things surrounding it, not only the service itself, but various configuration files and commands to interact with the running instances, is LXC. LXC space list, for example, lists your current set of Linux containers, which may or may not individually be known as LXCs anymore. This is something I need to learn and know about. Whole Macs. Once upon a time, the great desirable Macs, the 27-inch giants. These days, you can hardly give them away. Things will always get tinier and better and cheaper. Moore's law is not gonna let up like people are saying. There's a lot of people saying, "Oh, Moore's law is over." Moore's law is never over. It's just Intel's days of Moore's law are over. The people who invented Moore's law, Jeffrey Moore, one of the co-founders of Intel, those days are over. Sorry, Intel. But it'll always be going to the next newer, better, faster thing. Seemingly insurmountable obstacles will be surmounted. Stuff that seemed to have been the limitations from the laws of nature and the way physics works will just be rethought. Back up, retry, just like everywhere else. Back up and retry is such an important concept of the LXD and LXC work I'm doing. It's easy to mess up your master, your main. Can't use master so much as anymore. GitHub came around. Your main operating system. You can hardly even use host anymore. Everything is a client under the hardware level managers. Visors, hypervisors, Hyper-V, KVM, doesn't matter what you call it. The chips, the hardware chips these days, the CPU processors, the things that have multi-cores, even by virtue of the fact they have multi-cores, they have built-in resource management capabilities that are tapped into by the things we call the Hyper-V, hypervisor in the Intel and Windows world, and the KVM, the kernel virtual machine, in the Linux world. These hardware capabilities are tapped into in various ways by different things, but one thing's for sure, you don't have a host operating system anymore. Your host operating system is this low-level chip hardware stuff. You might have something like it in like a really small Linux machine that you don't even have access to. In the OpenStack virtual machine KVM system, they call it a DOM, I think, a DOM. And that's one of the few places where they expose a host operating system, but it's hardly even a host anymore. It's just the things that has the permission levels to do the resource management shell game of all the other systems. There used to be all this very specific language like level 1 virtualization, level 2 virtualization, and you almost never hear that language anymore. It's almost entirely just, you know, are you using a container or are you using a virtual machine? When it's a virtual machine, it uses considerably more resources. It has its own copy of the kernel and its own copy of a whole bunch of other operating system stuff. And when you're using a container, it just recycles it from your host machine. One machine is still kind of sort of considered host. The first one in, the first one installed, right? So on a typical Windows machine now, after you install Windows subsystem for Linux, you kind of like have two hosts. It's tempting to call Windows the host for Linux, but not really. They're sitting side by side under the hypervisor. And the tools for managing the show are accessible Windows side through the WSL program. So, you know, it's a little bit of the shell game as to what you call the host. But for all intents and purposes, the first Linux machine that you install under Windows from the Windows Store, in my case now, Ubuntu Bionic Beaver 18.04, because it's much more friendly towards LXD and LXC right now, is my host machine for the LXD and LXC containers. So we got a little background music now to our video. I hope that doesn't demonetize us, but I'm going to keep going. Probably is going to demonetize us, but maybe it's a small enough portion, and I'll use the YouTube tools that let you contest it. I was able to do that once in a stop that I did to the farmer's market. No, it wasn't a farmer's, it was a flea market a few weeks back, so I'll do that again. One of the big discoveries I made with LXC, the LXC command, right? Because it's now, the command is LXC that controls everything under LXD. So the big discovery was that it's LXC space EXEC. Right? So it's execute, allow LXC to execute on one of your container names. I have a container named foo now. So my commands look like LXC, EXEC, FOO. Now here's the kicker, space minus minus space. And and after that's where the commands go. That was a surprise. Specifically, the surprise was that any commands would use a space after a minus minus. The space after a minus minus is API ridiculousness, because command line switches, parameters, arguments, function, parameters. The verbose version of Unix style parameters are usually minus minus keywords. So minus minus help is a very common one. And so having a space after that minus minus really blew my mind. But what you have to keep in mind is when using LXC, exec container name, the command follows a minus minus. Minus minus is a delimiter. It's being used as a delimiter. And there might be other cases, but I've never seen minus minus used as a delimiter before. So I'll be getting the cat towers probably to the new place sooner rather than later, because my cats need their cat towers. Even though my cats are indoor cats, they have been getting their share of outdoors enough that I'm going to feel really bad cutting them off from that. And I think that's just about it. I even have some shelves still open. I've got some space still available for when I get back here with the kids' room. The kids' room is still to go. I'll do some of that today, I suppose. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a bit more efficient packing I can do later. But this has been a wonderful start. The bikes I can put in here, and the bikes I'll probably bring over to the new place because I'm gonna have more space over there than I expected at first. Yeah. All right, so duck me, duck you. Duck, duck, Jeep. Blasts from the past. Finding stuff from there that the kid can relate to, even tonight, is going to be such a big win. I need a mattress for them to sleep on. For me, I don't particularly need a mattress. Maybe I'll pick up a cot or something. And then tomorrow is the Pride Parade. The idea is we'll be, at the new place, and that puts us logistically a lot closer to where we need to be for the New York City, Manhattan Pride Parade. Let's see if this gate stays open. Those last people just pulled out. It's pulling shut. I'm not going to be able to slip through on theirs. So let's all right. Trip number 2 will be coming up. It's about 1 o'clock. I need to get to perhaps the other place once before then going out to the Catskills. So New York City and then the Catskills, perhaps that's an option. Or another option is directly to the Catskills with enough stuff loaded in my car for the one overnight. That actually is a much more logical way to do it. But it would require getting a couple of cots. That could be something I could do today. I could run over to Dick's Sporting Goods, pick up a couple of cots, one cot for them and one cot for me. Have to excuse me while I think out loud through all of this, right? I'm just giving you a window into my life. Honestly, it's because YouTube doesn't have any downside for just continuously, broadcasting. There's a fun little fair here going on, I think. Oh, it's such a wonderful area. Just as the lockdown is easing off and all the interesting activities are getting back into full swing is right when I am leaving this area. It takes about 2 years to really get familiar with a place, all the ins and outs, and just as I'm getting familiar with it is when the urgency is such that I need to move back. And then some sort of reversal occurs there, even a kind of rejection that took me by surprise, and is a potential forced rethinking. However, not really, because I understand interfaces. I understand interfacing. I'm sure there's technical terms for it, but from my experience, I very much know that that a certain amount of it is teenage years, right? So my kid is 11, and a certain amount of it is them, becoming, closer to teenage years. And there's that. However, there is also other things that are too sudden of opinion changes, too sudden of viewpoint shifts. They're not natural. People have realizations, but those realizations do not include that I'm like some sort of James Bond super criminal bad guy. Never have been, never will be. Probably have one correspondence to get off before I go to pick up the kid today. There's one thing I've really been meaning to say about prejudicial language, predisposing. Repeatedly saying something to someone to plant a suggestion in their head that has no basis in reality, but when repeated often enough, starts to take on a feeling of truth. There's a specific one of those that has to have an end put to it. And I need to document the fact that I am expressing that in a way that is not unclear, that other people looking at it in the future will say, no, that's a very fair request from you, Mike, and this should be abided by. It's in good faith. It's consistent with expectations and the agreements. And it's, in sync with reality. Of course, it's up to others to be the judge of that, but, that's what judges are for. Judges are good at judging. Document everything. If you don't write it down, it didn't happen. The astronomer's number one rule. I would not believe if anyone were actually still tuned into this. There is no end. Maybe I'll test how long YouTube will let me upload, what the time limit on an upload is. So the incantation I need to get good at, first of all, it's LXC. Once you do your LXD init, you don't have to do LXD much more at all. And if your LXC systems are really just throwaway systems, and all your good work is going to be pulled off into GitHub repos and stuff, you can just create and destroy them at will. I probably have a video coming up showing what Levinix is. Again, I show Levinix a fair amount of times, but it's important to get across the fact that you should be able to treat a Linux system or a Unix system or a NIX system of any sort as a rapid instantiate and throwaway, something you create, destroy, reset it, create it again from a new image. It's just a little place from which you can plug other things into to run. Now that's why Docker's so popular, because Docker is those other things generally now that you plug in to run from those locations. Ubuntu and Canonical is once again taking the lead with the Snap Store, and they're saying, oh, well, you know, you don't really need to use the Docker API. You just use our Snap Store, and you snap software in and you snap software out. And on the latest time I saw the Ubuntu 20.04 install, the desktop version, I went to look for the Synaptic Store, the graphical version of Aptitude, and I couldn't find it. I found the Snap Store, and there wasn't as much in there as the Aptitude or the Synaptic Store used to have, and I was really confused what was going on here. And that's when I really got clued into the fact that containers are taking over the App Store worlds. And I don't know how I feel about that. You know, Debian, from which Ubuntu was derived, already solved a lot of those problems with the apt system, except those installers don't work across repos. But is a system like Snap going to work across repos? Is an initiative from Ubuntu like that? Well, I say that like it's not going. I'm hoping that their LXD initiative is embraced across vendors. They're trying to do a vendor-independent implementation of containers, which now will work well with a vendor-independent implementation of a software store, of an app store. Snap it in, snap it out. All the dependencies get bundled with it. It's not very operating system-like. It doesn't modify an underlying operating system very much the way LXDs do. They are their own operating. It's a new instance of Linux. They're for very different things. So, you know, Docker is much more consumer-oriented because you have your one Linux desktop, which you're going to treat like a Windows desktop. You're not going to be swapping it out very much. It's your main thing. And in that Linux desktop, you're going to want to easily install whatever, you know, Libra, Open Libra, which is like Microsoft Office in the open source world. Or you'll want to install CAD software or whatever, you know, VS Code. And when you do that, you don't want it to be one of those distro dependent. You want it to work just as easily on a Red Hat derivative as you do on a Debian derivative. Those are the two main branches that are popular these days. Everything either came off the Red Hat branch, which was IBM funded back in the day, the first $1 billion Linux, or it came off of the Debian branch, which was a little more grassroots, a little less commercial, and a little more geared towards dependency conflict resolution. Very friendly to users, which it became the very popular Ubuntu, which became adopted by Microsoft as the default Linux that gets installed with WSL, with the Windows subsystem for Linux. So both these branches have very active user bases. One has not clearly won over the other, although Microsoft, including Ubuntu, goes a long way to making it, as its namesake company infers, canonical, the canonical version of Linux. And they're using this magical moment. I have someone who just keeps zoning out at the red lights. Canonical is using this magical moment in order to solidify the leadership position in necessary tools. Two big necessary tools: container management, for which Docker was not really doing an adequate job. It had to be more operating system level and persistent. Persistence is key. You know, if you did an apt install under a container, it should be under a portable container. It should not be in your main host operating system. Boy, this person in front of me really is driving poorly. I'm going to increase my following distance. So Canonical has taken the lead on better containerization technology than Docker, what most developers would want most of the time. Now, Docker is what most consumers would want, because I just want to plug in software. I want to use the Snap Store, which uses underlying Docker technology, so that apps are isolated on an app level. But developers, especially, people who are learning Linux, people who want to kick the tires, people who want to experiment without corrupting or blowing up their host system and reinstalling Linux all the time, would need things like LXD, what Canonical is leading. And Canonical's also leading the Snap Store, which is two technologies that are very interrelated and work together extremely well. The relationship between LXD and the Snap Store is deep and obvious, even though the Snap Store would probably benefit more from the Docker tip. But containers are containers. It's a container-based Linux store, Linux app store. So I bet it works just as well with Docker containerization as LXD. And Canonical's making the move. They're turning themselves into a really, really big player on the fundamental tools, which they weren't before. They mostly inherited most of their awesomeness from the Debian distro of Linux it was derived from. Debian came first. Debian is the people who took the source code from Linux.org or Linux Foundation and said, oh, we're going to make our own distro. And they build it from source, adding their secret sauce. Other people take that kind of thing, Debian, and add their own additional secret sauce, which Ubuntu did, Canonical did with Ubuntu, and their secret sauce was driver support, just supporting lots of hardware. So Ubuntu installed well on no matter what old laptop or no matter what old tower you had. Ubuntu was pretty sure to install and support the CD-ROM drives or whatever. So Ubuntu was about broad-based driver support, and then offering that kind of support as a commercial service to business, which is ultimately what they ended up doing with Microsoft. You can bet Microsoft is paying Canonical a pretty penny to be the default install of Windows subsystem for Linux and to take care of a lot of the whack-a-mole problems that surely came from that, especially on hardware support. Now, one of the things that Ubuntu tried to do was desktop graphical user interface innovation, right? So the GNOME Foundation, the open software people, put out their own desktop called GNOME, G-N-O-M-E, the same G and N from the GNU Foundation. GNU is not Unix. GNU stands for GNU is not Unix. It's a self-referential acronym. Those same people, who really has Richard Matthew Stallman behind it, put out the GNOME desktop for Linux, and that was the official one, and it wasn't all that polished. So Ubuntu came out and did their own called Unity, not to be confused with the Unity game engine, but Ubuntu Canonical put out the Unity desktop. It was fairly innovative. I used it for a while. I liked it. It was more polished than the GNOME interface, but it created an unwelcome schism in the free and open source world. It was, no matter how good it was, the effort was going in the wrong place. It was not going into something that improved the overall state of free and open source software. It improved the state of Ubuntu, which everyone was scared of. Everyone was scared that Canonical would use its leadership position to canonicalize Ubuntu to the detriment of all other distros. And the Unity desktop was evidence of that. So to try and be good guys, to try and be good players, Ubuntu gave up Unity and is now using the GNOME interface. Anyone who puts a visual desktop on their GNOME interface, on their Ubuntu system, is going to see the GNOME interface, not the Unity one anymore. And that's it. That's catches you up with all my thinking. Now, those those Linux graphical desktops are almost a non-issue, because what is a graphical desktop? People like it because it's eye candy. They like to do customizations, control the animations and such. But Microsoft, in doing graphical integration with Linux, said, we already have a windowing user interface. You don't need another one. You don't need two desktops. Just let all the Linux graphical software hook into the Windows graphical APIs. They made a mapping layer. They do use, some graphics engines underneath that are from the Linux world. They use, I believe, X Server and Wayland. Wayland is a high-performance replacement for X Server, but all their instructions and commands just map over to the same thing that draws onto the screen for Windows. It's a non-issue. It's a shell game. There's really no reason to have loyalties to or to get hung up on the graphical user interface of things. The shell game can always be played there. The one place the shell game can't be played is on the underlying stuff that's running it all. That's where you want your forward slashes. That's where you want your conventional file directories. That's where you want your standard set of Unix commands. That's where you want your functions like piping, and everything is treated as a file. That's where real old school power arises from. You learn Vim on top of all of that, and there's almost no system you can't walk into and do something productive with. Anywho, I'm back. It's an hour and 40 minutes. Jeez, should I keep going? I think I'll probably start doing an upload while I pack the car again, and I'll wrap this up here at an hour and 40 minutes. There's really no reason to see how long I can go out of principle. You've been with me for a good long while. It would be amazing if anyone actually got through one of these things from beginning to end. I don't see any reason to. Is my voice really that hypnotizing? Could you really listen to me talk about operating systems and APIs all day? If so, you get your wish. I'll keep doing it. After I upload this one, I'll make sure I've got enough space on my phone, and I'll make sure I got enough charge in it, and I'll start the next one on the next trip out to the storage, to the public storage spot. And hopefully this will be my last one. My third car loading today will be for what I want to bring with me to the Catskills to pick up my kid, and then off to New York City for a very much camping-like night. I'm going to try and make it fun. Be yourself, Mike. Be your good old self. And you can't go wrong. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell. Don't forget to thumbs up the video, and don't forget to comment. Later.